Generation bad, we don't care what you say. No run down the streets, gonna party all day. We're generation bad, yeah, get out of the way. We're gonna rocket to space and give you show, hooray!
Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean. This is the Quackcast, Quackcast number 379, the Drunk Duck Quackcast, of course. And with me is Tanserine. Hi, Tans.
Hello.
Emma Claire. Hi, Emma.
Hello.
Pitface. Hello. And Crazy Banes.
Hello.
Hi, Banes. You needed a double barrel name, so
yeah.
Even I've got 2 syllables to mine. Come on. Oh no, 3, 4,
4 even
4. Oh my god, I'm like a king. Oh, it just keeps on ramping up. So on this Quackcast, we're going to be talking about tropes, which is Emma's news post from last week, and yeah, we're going to get into that because tropes are so interesting and there's so many things to them, so many aspects. But before we get into that, I want to talk about the featured comic. So here I am with the featured comic, which was Generation Bad. Hello, this is Ozone Ocean, and my feature for the week was Generation Bad. Maureen is a happy-go-lucky student just wanting nothing more than to go and see her favourite band with her best friend. But it looks like that's not going to happen. This is a world filled with superpowered super-villains and only a tiny handful of heroes to stand against them. Poor Maureen is about to experience the supervillain problem firsthand. Generation Bad has lovely, lush, full-colour digital art. The costume designs, their colours, and the fight scenes are a particular treat. I can't wait to see more. This is classic action drama superhero comic. If that's your thing, jump right in, and even if it's not, it's worth a look anyway. This is a comic by The Red Death, and it's rated T. Now, you might remember The Red Death from A Bad Guy High if you're a Drunk Duck person, which is a very popular long-running comic, and a lot of people rightly love it because he's a great creator. So yeah, this was it's enjoyable. There's a lot of intros so far. You're introduced to all the heroes, which is good. You know, very old-fashioned style. There's pages that talk about them, and heroes and villains, I think, talk about their traits and all that kind of stuff. You know, give you a character portrait. And then we get into the story, and we sort of start out with a bit of a superhero versus supervillain fight, and that's contrasted with also what's happening with the mundane Maureen and her best friend and her high school or university, probably university kind of stuff. So yeah, you get a nice 2 streams happening at once. It's cool. It's good to see a superhero comic, even though if that's not your thing, and it's not my thing. I'm not really into superheroes myself, but you know, it's fun to dip your toe into that kind of stuff, especially if it's done really well, which this is, of course, by a creator who has a lot of experience. So have a read of Generation Bad by The Red Death, rated T. And that was our featured comic, Generation Bad. Okay, next up we have the featured music from Gun Wallace, and this week Gun Wallace has given us a theme to Yasu no Monogatari, which was, I think, Kwai featured that one, because I remember having trouble saying it. It's one of those complicated names, Yasu no Monogatari.
It's a tough one.
Sounds very Japanese. The theme is floating out on a blue river of dreams into an echoing crystal cave illuminated by thousands of refracted glittering lights, travelling on your way further underground, deeper and deeper, to more exciting and mysterious sights. So take it away, Gun Wallace, with Yasu no Monogatari. And that was the music for Yasuno Monogatari. Yasuno Monogatari. There he is. Thanks very much for that, Gumwallace. All right. So, tropes, Emma. Your whole trope thing. So, you started this off with a picture of two guys carrying glass across the street, which is a famous comedy trope.
Famous gag, yes. That was actually taken. That was a scene from Regular Show, which is obviously a cartoon. And like you see so many permutations of that, and I think I talked about in the article different ways that TV tropes suggest that you can subvert that sort of thing. So yeah, I thought it was something that everyone would recognize. It was a good way to start.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm not quite sure what else to say.
Well, that's a famous trope. I think it started out in the whole silent movie days. You know, I don't know, Keystone Cops, all that kind of thing. So you'd have two people carrying a sheet of glass across the street. So immediately people would go, "Oh no, I hope nothing happens to that."
Yeah.
And then a speeding car comes down the road, and the guys just avoid it, and you think, "Oh, phew, nothing happened." And then the police come afterwards and go smash straight through it, and it's hilarious. And
well, the whole point of me sort of using that one is that it's been done to the point where it's, I don't know, it's kind of exists in its own language. It's actually at the point now where the only way that you could probably use that gag in all honesty is to subvert it. So
yeah, you'd have to somehow.
Yeah.
Right?
There's no way that no, that's not true. There probably is a way that you could pull off the gag as it was meant to be, but it's now just reached a point where it's at the level of subversion, which is, I thought, a really interesting point. And the fact that TV Tropes has an entire list of suggestions on how to subvert that particular trope. And the thing which I went on to post underneath that, which was a series which actually subverts the entire superhero genre. And that was one of my favorites, which is One Punch Man, which started as a webcomic. By one. One Punch Man, right? So that is a whole subversion of the superhero genre. The hero who is so powerful that he punches things in one punch, and now he has no one to fight. So he's on a constant quest, apart from the fact that he just tries. And the best thing about it is that he's a hero that no one takes seriously because he just doesn't look the part. He does a really basic training routine, and then suddenly he's a huge big superhero. Like
100 sit-ups, 100 push-ups, and 100 squats a day or something like that. And
then a 9-mile run.
Yeah.
And they were like, "That's what people should be doing."
Me to exhaustion, but when I couldn't move my body anymore, I just kept going like,
yeah.
I trained until I went bald.
Yeah. And everyone's just like super confused because they're like, "Hey, dude, that's like kind of what you should be doing. Like that's the level that people should like. That is not the level of training it would take to become a superhero that punches alien beings out of existence." Like, so like the picture which I obviously, if you read the article I posted, was that scene from The Incredibles, which Incredibles 2 is coming out. Cannot wait. But anyway, so like The Incredibles, where Elastigirl is saying, "Of course I have a secret identity. Can you see me like this in the supermarket?" And then there's Tenma dressed up as a superhero in the supermarket. And I just could not find a better illustration of subversion than that. So you look around, and I think the best way, I think what I mentioned in the article is that learning your genre's tropes allows you to really play and really shake it up for the audience. And if you've heard me a few times on the Quackcast, you know I love subverting. I love keeping audiences on their toes. So playing with tropes is a definite win, like a definite easy way to do that.
Yeah, so tropes are something that exist because they've been used before. But yeah, like you say in the thing, they I think you said it, they become maybe, yeah, we did talk about this at some stage. Anyway, the fact that everybody knows them, so they become a shorthand of talking about a whole lot of things. So you don't have to talk about all this stuff because it's already embedded in the trope. So people already know what it is and know what it means and stuff like that. So you can skip ahead by having it in a trope. And that's why subversion works so well, because yeah, everybody thinks they know what to expect. So you can mix it up and constantly around. But if you do that too much, then the trope becomes meaningless itself. So that could start to happen. That kills a trope after a while.
Well, ironically, it could actually end up becoming like a style of yours or a signature of yours or your own author trope that you have to, like, every trope that people see you then subvert. So that could be like the next level of meta, if that's the sort of reputation you also want to, if you want to get super meta about it. But yeah, no, it's, yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of, I don't know what else to say about it that I haven't already said in the article.
Well, I find, yeah, so there's tropes. I think I made a point that tropes in comedy, they're a different thing to tropes in a serious thing. So you don't really subvert tropes in a serious thing as much. They don't have the continual level of change and mixing up, because in a serious thing, tropes are just a standard, a shortcut to explain something, or a shortcut to, set a scene without, building it bit by bit. You just plug it in like Lego. That's what tropes can be in serious stuff. Whereas in comedy, that's death. If you made a comedy out of that, of standard jokes, it's like Airplane, it's, those, not Airplane, but Airplane 2, Airplane 3, those kind of things or Scream 2. Oh no, what is it? Those Meet the Spartans, all that kind of stuff. Those things are built of jokes that have been done, and they're just crap because there's no reinvention, no cleverness. But
part of like what a joke is, or why people laugh, is because it's something unexpected, and that's the antithesis of a trope.
Although having said that, though, like, I'm sure that there are definite, like, say, horror, which I would say is a fairly, okay.
Horror is tricky, isn't it?
There's a spectrum of unintentional comedy and horror and actual serious horror. But there is definitely sort of like conventions or tropes that exist in horror that if you were to introduce into like a serious horror story, as for an example, I can't exactly think of one right now off the top of my head, but I guess I could, the only example I can think of now is like the existence of web series on YouTube is like almost a subversion of the horror, like the conventional horror tropes. They're playing with the formula. They're playing with.
Well, Scream did that originally, didn't it? That was the whole thing. That was a reinvention of took horror tropes and mixed them up, and that's made horror popular again once it got really tired towards the end of the 90s or wherever that was. That Scream came along and changed things, and suddenly horror's flavor of the month again.
Or it was like self-referential anyway. Sorry.
Yeah, and you.
I think Scream didn't exactly take itself too seriously as a horror movie. There's this sensation or this feeling that it's very much on the fence of being a parody of horror more than actual horror, like a splatter parody maybe. At least the one that I saw, which was the first one.
It definitely sat on the fence of camp, and it was invoking the schlocky horror, like essentially the schlocky horror tropes that had come before it. And I feel like that's what it was aping. But in terms of like actual I mean, you look at psychological horror. A lot of psychological horror have their own tropes as well. Usually, I mean, I can't remember the last psychological horror I saw, in movie-wise anyway. Mind you, I don't see a lot of horror, so that might be a bit of a problem, but that I know of.
Crimson Peak, that was a psychological horror, fairly recent one.
Well, the one that I'm thinking of is Shutter Island, and I can't tell you the amount of psychological horror movies that I've seen that didn't involve a twist. Like, they build it up and build it up. And then the trope is, oh, there's a twist.
That's
true. Okay, so like this is... So I agree that in horror films, tropes work to an extent. But so there's the subverted ones that we're talking about, which is usually in the more, spoofy kind of horror films, which aren't really all that horror films sometimes. But tropes, subtle tropes work. And horror films are built on successful horror films are usually built on subtle tropes. And I'm going to make that distinction because... Pitface loves her some fucking horror movies. I thrive on horror movies. And I've become super cynical about them. I was just lamenting this to somebody just before the cast, actually, to one of my fellow horror junkies online. And I was typing this thing out, and I'm just like, you know what? I think I might be getting too old for this genre. There's no substance anymore. Nobody has a thesis anymore. Just throw shit to a wall, and I'm going on. But the thing is, so I was thinking about tropes as well. And there's the blatant tropes that we all know of, which is, the jump scare that has the lead up and then the scary sound effect as there's the jump, which is in everything now and pisses me off so much because it's so formulaic and it wasn't always there. But and despite the fact that it's so made fun of now, it still continues to be there in a serious way. So that's an example of a very blatant trope that doesn't work anymore. But subtle tropes that tend to build horror movies is horror movie music, for example, is very tropey. And that sounds weird to say. How can music be a trope? But there's just very distinct uses of silence and sound and build-up that you'll see in so many movies that are supposed to signal you to pay attention that something's coming or that there's something happening that you're supposed to be paying attention to, perhaps plot-wise, without blatantly coming out and saying like, hey, look at this, viewer. Little subtle cues like that are tropes for a reason because they're cues for the viewer to take things in. Yeah.
The jump scare as well is always built up by the pretending ramping up of the music, da 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 da, and then just the cat walks out and you think, oh my god. Oh,
the music and the shot of the camera angles more often will give it away. Like I noticed I was watching, what was I watching earlier? I watched The Autopsy of Jane Doe. And it started off pretty neat, but it's the movie that sent me into my rant about movies losing their thesis. Because it could have been really cool. But anyway, it has this scene towards the beginning, this fake out jump scare. So when it comes to horror movies, you have the jump scare by the killer who comes, and then you have the jump scare that ends up being benign, like, the girlfriend jumping out and be like, hey, surprised you, And this movie had both. And I noticed before they had the first jump scare, I can't remember how they led up with the second one, but I think it was pretty similar. The first jump scare, when the main character is ambushed by his girlfriend, who I care nothing for. I'm mean. I'm really mean to characters. She was fine. There was nothing wrong with her, but I wanted her to die. And she did. Spoilers. But she you could tell, or no. Okay, so I'm going to give it credit. The first jump scare wasn't done so bad. It had the cheesy sound effect, but I wasn't really waiting for a jump scare. Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, well, kind of props to you. But the second one, the second jump scare with an actual boogie coming out, it was like the way the camera angle was going, it was focusing in on this peeking hole, and it's bringing you in like, oh, like, you know, it's supposed to be getting really tense. And if it wasn't a trope that was used so many times before, it would be getting super tense. But it's not, because I know something's going to jump up and it's going to be cheap. Like boom, and the sound effect. And I was almost counting down, like, all right, it's going to jump. There's going to be a sound effect, and then on we go. They're not going to make anything of it, is the thing. Nothing will come of it. And so, like,
they
anyway,
relied too heavily on the trope. Well, I wanted to talk about that. I made a comment on the news post about it. It's the fact that when you're doing something that's serious, you know, say in the comedy, like I was talking about, you can reinvention is fine on tropes, so you can build and build and build on them. But in serious stuff, not only you don't really reinvent them. More than anything, you've got to know where the trope comes from and why it's used. Because if you use a trope just plugging it in without knowing why you should be plugging it in, just copying it from someone else, you introduce errors, or you do things the wrong way and you mess up, and so the end product doesn't make sense. It doesn't work properly. It's weird in some way, or it's just messed up.
Yeah.
Like,
it's not in the right context, or it's not executed. I mean, tropes can be executed masterfully, or they can be executed like horribly, or somewhere in between.
Yeah,
sure.
And I was thinking the same sort of applies to the horror example that Pitt's bringing up. It's you plug it in and you don't even know why you're really properly doing it. You've just got to understand how it's been used before and how it really should be. And that it goes down to the simplest thing. Say if you're building like a sci-fi scenario or a military scenario, and I think Emma had this thing like control rooms and stuff like that. You know, that's a part of sci-fi. You have that, but what kind of control rooms do you have, and why do you have that particular control room? So you've got to realize that control rooms in sci-fi were originally, in the earliest sci-fi, they were built around American warships, or NASA mission control, or something like that. But there are all different kinds of control rooms, and what kind properly matches your sci-fi scenario? Maybe it's a mining control, a mining operations control room. Maybe it's a power station control room that best fits it. Maybe it's a TV control, a TV production control room that best fits your thing. So you've got to really understand what you're using and why you're using it for, rather than just, that one in that movie looked great, let's just pick that. For some things that works great, especially if you're doing like something like what was that comedy sci-fi thing with oh damn it, I can't remember, the one with Tim Allen in it. Do you guys remember that one? No one.
The Santa Claus.
I was thinking Buzz Lightyear.
Oh jeez, no one remembers it. Yeah.
No, Galaxy Quest. You must be talking about Galaxy Quest.
Oh, Galaxy Quest.
Exactly. But that, again, that's comedy. So you just the whole comedy of that is just, stealing the tropes and building it and making fun of it. But yeah, that's a thing. So I see in a whole lot of military stuff, because I'm Pinky TA, my comic is also based around that military thing. And initially when I was doing it, I was sort of just saying, oh yeah, I could just take this from here, take that from there, and just plug it in and fit. And then the more research you do and the more you understand these things, you realize, hang on, that's just a hodgepodge. This just doesn't fit. All these kind of things, I've done it the wrong way. So you've really got to understand why these things go there in order to get them right. You see so many military themed things where people will just shout things like, fire in the hole. That's what they always shout when there's like an explosion, which is a specific American sort of term, and no other army, no other people in the whole world use it. It's just that happened. That's like an early 20th century thing, and that I think it's probably expanded now, but that's where that came from. So it doesn't apply to everything. If you're doing a medieval like war battle, people don't shout "fire in the hole." An explosion happens. I mean, come on. You've got to know why things are there, and yeah. So that's a big part of it.
I think a
okay.
lot of that comes down to, because tropes are very particular in terms of what genre they belong to. So I think having a knowledge of the genre that you're working in informs the sort of tropes that you go on to use in your story. So, for instance, if you're doing like a romance comedy, there are going to be very particular tropes that you would use to demarcate the fact that your story is a romance comedy. And same with a superhero genre or a comedy in general or slice of life. There are particular tropes which are very much tied to the genre that your story would belong to. And yes, I agree in some respect that you've got to be aware of where your tropes might have originated from. But I think it's just that also just comes down to good writing as well, and actually giving your story a proper structure rather than trying. And I think a lot of new creators, as they're starting out, they tend to borrow things from places. And I think I mentioned this possibly in my style article, which I did last. When you first start out, the first thing you start to do is borrow from other people, because you're learning the craft. So when I first did my first real web comic, one that had at least 2 fans, I borrowed from everywhere. Like, I was borrowing from Sailor Moon. I was borrowing from all these different mangas I was reading at the time. And like you said, it was an absolute hodgepodge. It was a patchwork of all the different influences I had come across at that stage. But eventually I kind of got into the swing of it, and it became its own story, which by that stage I lost interest anyway. But when you start out, you start playing with things and start borrowing from other people. So if you really want to get an edge on your story, maybe just really come to terms with what the genre is that you're writing within, and then investigate what tropes are within that genre, which you can possibly use and or subvert to add another layer to your story.
Which one's best fit? Yeah, so you understand where things can go and audience expectations around those tropes. The worst one I had in my comic is towards the start of it, or whatever, Pinky goes onto the battleship, whatever, and then you have this scene with these people just sort of talking, and people in charge, like an admiral or something like that, and they go, "Oh, now the real plan can begin," all that kind of bullshit that you see in every single bloody anime. You always have those people go, "Ha ha ha ha." They don't know what they're getting into.
Everything has proceeded exactly as I.
That's it. That's it. Always.
Everything's falling into place.
Oh my God.
Plan which I've been planning all my life.
To not have villains fall into that kind of thing, though, because villains, it's like they become their own kind of mouthpiece, and sometimes you kind of write, because villains are not who has the main screen time in a lot of things. They just kind of pop up when it's time for some kind of plot point to happen, or when when it's time for them to get whatever thing going in progress that you need in your plot. But
they're a point of conflict.
Exactly, and that's why they fall so hard into those trope categories sometimes. The monologuing and the coming out and explaining their whole plan to the hero and stuff, because a lot of times it's so hard to find the place for an exposition to explain those things outside of a scene like that, where they have the hero and they're explaining things to them, because like I said, they don't have a lot of screen time, so it's just like they fall into that tropey area so hardcore sometimes it's hard to get around.
Sometimes, Oh, go on.
So you go.
I was going to say tropes are often tropes for very good reasons. So they have become a thing, they're like a framework of a house. Sometimes you need a pointed roof. There's a good reason for it, and you need a foundation and bases, and that's a good way to build around. Yeah, so it's hard to get around that.
If there's one writing trope which I have really come to dislike, no, I would say it's at the level of hatred now. It's just pure and utter rage and hatred every time I see it. It's creating conflict by not explaining anything.
God, I hate that. Yeah, I hate
when
that.
The student is saying to the master, hey, I don't quite get your logic. And they're like, oh, just trust me. And I'm like, nah. Like, you could circumvent, like, the amount of times the end of the world could have been circumnavigated if someone just said, all right, this is my thinking.
Circumvented, yeah, exactly.
Like, I was playing a video game. What was it? I actually was playing a video game a couple of nights ago, and I spent the entire time, it's one from one of my favorite series, and I spent the entire time just really, really getting into it and just tearing it apart, because I was like, this is a terribly written character. This is a terribly written conflict. This is the weirdest antagonist ever, and he is consistently doing spirit fingers. I'm not joking. Like, he literally moves his fingers every time he's doing something diabolical, and I'm like, what is going on with the writing? Who gave this? Yes, he literally does these, where he's like lifting up the world with his weird spirit fingers, and it was driving me nuts the entire time. And it was like every bad writing trope that they could possibly put in their story, they did. And I was like, I'm done. I'm done with people not explaining things. I'm done with people just being like, oh, if you were with the light side, you just obey and trust me. I'm like, no. That's called blind obedience, and that's what happens in cults.
Exactly. Yeah, that is an overused trope. The people and the misunderstandings that it's always used in like comedy. It works great in comedy. Misunderstandings are fantastic for that. But in a serious thing, it's so annoying when one of the characters they do something that makes another character angry, but they did it for good reasons. Maybe they had to save a family from drowning or whatever, and he was late to this date, and he doesn't explain it fully, and the misunderstanding, grows between them, and this contrived.
It's such a shoddy plot point now, man. Like, you got that, and then the other big one is like that's really similar to that is like the lie. Like, somebody has something that they have to hide from another character.
Ugh.
I'm the one who accidentally ran over your kitten 5 years ago. And then, like, they can't tell them about it through the whole fucking thing for, like, the stupidest reason, just for the sake of, like, having this contention there. Like, oh, well, what'll happen when this comes to a head? I'm like, just fucking, nobody cares anymore. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Exactly. And this thing gets revealed when this person is in a leading position, and everything, the stakes are really high. Everything is hinging on his initiative. But this thing gets revealed, and everybody just flips him off. Despite
right?
that, he's about to save the world, but, that kitten.
You're not who I thought you were.
Was run over.
Oh, the amount of times you hear what you just said is like, you're not the person I thought you were. It's like, well, I can explain.
No, it's like, can we resolve this, after the crisis? That would be good.
It's like, you can hate me now. Perfectly fine with that. but we just got to cooperate for the next 10 minutes and then you never have to speak with me again. I promise. Pinky swear.
I was watching the stupid film Pitch Perfect 2, and the whole thing is based on, like, okay, it's a sequel, so we have to introduce conflict again, you know. So in the beginning, in the first movie, they won the big a cappella competition, and they're the world's heroes. And in the second film, you have to take them down a peg in order so they can build up and be the underdogs again. So that's the you know, you have to do that in crappy sequels. So they did it in this one, but they do it by Rebel Wilson or whatever, Fat Amy. She's dangling from some ribbon or something, and she falls upside down and her pants split, and everyone sees her vagina, you know, the whole world, and she's spinning around in front of the Queen or something like that, and everyone sees, and it's like worldwide humiliation or whatever. And
Why didn't that make her more popular? I don't understand.
Yeah, but because of that, they're like
Looks for porn stars.
they cut off everything, and everyone sort of goes, "Oh my god, how could you do that? Oh, you're out of the competition. You've embarrassed us." And well, I thought
did it deliberately.
Yeah, I thought that was true. Exactly. Why was that a problem?
Yeah. Janet Jackson still gets work, and there was that one time she had on stage, and that was deliberate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Was it really? No, I heard.
Oh, you know, they say it's not, but come on, it's Hollywood.
Yeah.
Of course it is.
The attention-getting thing.
If it's
I had no idea that's what Pitch Perfect was about. I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
If Janet wasn't
kinda shocking.
deliberate, you have to question, why was she wearing a pasty, and why was the panel of a leather suit completely removable with a very neat seam around the edge? Yeah, that doesn't happen accidentally. It's just that.
Either that or you're really pissed off your wardrobe designer. Like, really seriously did not give them that bonus they probably should have gotten.
But they still gave you a pasty anyway, just in case. So.
No, she just wears those. Those are for
Testing this premise in real life, in the last Winter Olympics, one of the couples in ice skating, the ice skating couple that was going for the gold, the lady was wearing this Hawaiian style, very freely thing to dance, and in the end, as she was being dipped backwards by her partner, you know, they had this amazing number that they executed flawlessly. Her dress's strap broke, and everybody saw her boob. I saw her boob. Okay.
Did it land? Did she land the move though? That's the most important thing.
Yes, she did land the move.
Oh, see, that's what matters.
Exactly, and the poor woman. Anyway, I mean, she had 6 million people see her boob without her permission, basically. But you know, she had no pasty underneath or anything. And she wasn't, you know, castigated for it, except, of course, that she did receive a couple of penalty points for not having a secure strap or something like that. And she lost the gold for that. She got silly with her partner because of her stupid.
Yeah, because her routine went tits up.
Yeah. But I mean, she wasn't she's still the queen of ice skating, and in the world championship that came right after, she got the gold.
Oh, I bet she had I bet it was just one giant latex suit the next time.
No, but she had the same costume because they have the same costume throughout the season. I'm a fan of ice skating, all kinds of ice skating. And the difference we could see in her costume was that instead of having straps, the entire top clasped back at the nape of her neck. without any button or anything. Like it was something over her head, and it would like it would literally not break. Like it was impossible.
Like a metal corset underneath, just in case.
A metal corset and a double mastectomy just to make absolutely extra sharp. The poor lady. But still, the world doesn't hate her for it.
No. Instead, everyone was outraged that she lost the gold for that because it wasn't her fault, and she still, remained like she didn't stop what she did.
She kept going,
even though she was trying to push up the damn thing. Still landed the moves.
Yeah. And if the guy's strap broke and he had a little bit of a slip, he'd be fine. He wouldn't get docked points.
I don't know. No one wants to see a testicle hang out. That would just.
No. I was talking further up the torso.
All right.
We're being classy today.
Oh, jeez. There's no need for classiness.
That premise was bogus for Perfect 2.
Exactly. Yeah, so false conflict, you have to be careful with it because audiences are annoyed by it, I reckon. Mm-hmm. Well, I am, this audience.
It's a bit lazy. I'm sure you can do false conflict and pull it off, but it's very easy to fall into the laziness of that. And maybe there's a point where you can have characters that have a disagreement because they are not listening to each other, because that does happen. People just don't listen to each other at times. But there has to be a point where those two characters come together and they actually be like, oh, look, I know I wasn't listening, or they actually resolve that and maybe begin to improve as a result of that. That's one way I could see it potentially working.
Exactly.
But I don't know. It's just something which I saw and I was like, by the end of the game, I was just ready to kind of I was so happy to be done with it because I was like, the character's name is Terra, and every time I heard his name, I'm like, no, his name's terrible. Just a terrible character. And I hate him. And I have no sympathy for him. He deserves everything he gets because he's kind of stupid.
But have you guys used any tropes in your comics deliberately? One of them I've just put in there. I love in anime they have the glasses trope of people who, whenever someone has glasses, they're always scheming or evil, and they push up the glasses. Oh, I hate that.
Oh yeah, but it's always with the middle finger.
That's Zugo.
And they're white and they reflect everything.
They got the big round. Yeah, we got that.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yep. I've got one of those. One of my comics is actually dedicated to romance tropes and subverting them, which we're already starting to do, and I think we just pissed people off. But anyway.
You were talking about that last time. I think,
I'm starting to do it now, and I think I'm pissing people off. But anyway, you've seen it coming. But yeah, my other series, not so much. I haven't got a lot. I guess I guess every sci-fi series has to have a spaceship race at some stage. So we do have that. That's a thing that we're doing. I'm trying to think. We do have the sci-fi horror opening as well. We did do that.
That was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, that turned out quite well, actually. That will pay off, I promise.
I'm waiting for that.
So we'll be like 60 years old, but it will pay off, I promise.
Our trope is that we don't get anything done.
Oh, the classic webcomic creator trope.
Yep.
Yeah, it's all by design. It's deliberate.
Yeah.
Yep.
The trope of, that dreaded, oh, I'm on hiatus indefinitely.
Oh my God. I hate that when it happens.
Actually, in
I understand it, but I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bottomless Waitress, that was like all tropes, really. I mean, the characters were complete tropes, weren't they, Baines?
Yeah, well, they're, I guess, would you call the characters tropes or archetypes? I mean, I guess it's sort of a, yeah, like those three personalities are sort of a classic.
A ditzy blonde with big boobs and big eyes and, you know, extreme
like
hourglass figure.
The tough one, more ill-tempered, like sort of stronger one, and then the ditzy blonde is sexy, and then the kind of the normal one.
Yeah.
Somewhere in between, sort of this more sensitive type. I mean, that's, yeah, definitely. I did that in my own comic, too. Just kind of, you fall into it, you know? But it's just a nice mix. Just for character interaction, it just kind of works, you know?
It's classic tropes, yeah.
Yeah, it's classic for a pretty good reason.
Yes.
Well, you can, you know, yeah, if you're, I don't know if I was that aware of it when I created my cast, but when we did Bottomless Waitress, I was definitely aware of it. But with that one, it's just kind of like, looking back, it's like, oh, it's just sort of, you know, the nice guy, the wild guy, or no, what would it be? I don't know, like Larry Moe and Curly kind of thing. And then also the duo trope where there's the sort of the more normal one, and then the sort of wackier friend who.
Oh, you mean the comedic and the straight man?
Yeah, type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you build on that, so you've got like Seinfeld.
Even though.
And then you got George.
Yeah, Seinfeld is.
And then
Seinfeld and George. Yeah.
I think the comedic straight man duo is something which that's actually a really successful trope, and that works so well and it's also one where the characters can swap as well. And it's one that I always enjoy. So
yeah, it just kind of works. Like from Abbott Costello, and probably before that even, all the way up to now.
Laurel and Hardy, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it works on a really basic human interaction as well. Like, you think of the amount of friends that you have, and you think, okay, like you might have one friend who's really serious, and that means that you end up being a little bit sillier. And then like you might have another friend who's way sillier than you. So you have to balance them out by being the straight man. And like, I know in like my own relationships, I always usually end up being the straight man. It's very rare I get to be the silly one. As Alex said, he'll get to be the fun parent. And I'm like, oh, that'll be fun. Just because I'm responsible doesn't mean it won't be fun. But yeah, like,
kid, how to balance your checkbook. Great times are ahead.
I'm fun, aren't I? Doing your taxes is a good time. Yeah. So like, it's a trope that never really gets old because it works on an interaction that you probably encounter nearly every day.
That's a good point.
I like what you said about you become. Oh, sorry, man.
No, go on.
That I feel that way. That I'm sometimes the sort of more serious person, and sometimes the goofball. Like, I notice that with my characters who are like that. Like, I'm like, oh, sometimes I am Oscar. Maybe a lot of the time. Sometimes I'm TK. You know, I definitely veering more into TK as I get older and more older. Yeah.
So what about you?
Very Oscar to me, I think. Sorry.
I'm sorry?
You're very
I said I think you're still very Oscar-y, but that doesn't have anything to do with anything.
A lot of people have said that. It's probably true. Yeah.
Like, I wish I was Edge. Edge.
I guess you're probably right. Like, I want to be it's like the Luke Skywalker Han Solo thing. Like, I want to be Han Solo. And you're like, but if I'm honest, I'm probably Luke Skywalker.
That's okay.
All right.
Luke. Mark
Sure,
Hamill went on to have a very lucrative voiceover career.
Absolutely.
He got to be the Joker.
He's the Joker, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Exactly. Nothing's cooler than that. Yeah, that's a good point, that the fact that the tropes are tropes often because they mirror something in reality. most of the time I'd say tropes are just totally in of their own thing. They have no mirror, really. They're sort of like a twisted version of reality. They're a stylized. They're a stylization because they're a shortcut for so many things. But they do have some sort of grain of realistic or some basis in reality, often. At least not, a complete basis, but they do reflect some kind of tendency in reality, and that's their stylized version of it. Yeah, like you say, with the straight man and the comedic man. Comedic man. That's not what he's called.
I'm not quite sure what the name of the actual trope is. I know the straight man really well because that's pretty much what I do all the time. So yeah, like that's I think that was the point. I don't know what point I was trying to make. I kind of lost my train of thought halfway through the sentence.
You pulled a pit face.
I am
pulled a pit face.
I'm not on my game
Starts
today.
after rating your
Now you should, taking it to our trope, you should throw a fit now.
Yeah.
God damn it! Frickin'.
Hang on, let me get my rage on. Bonus points if I got something to throw.
She's become apoplectic.
You have to leave and go cry in the bathroom until the cast is over, and then come back. I'm fine. I'm okay. I need something to eat. I'm just hungry. Shut up.
No one can hear me if my microphone's on mute.
Yeah, fuck off.
Moot. Oh god. But say what you said about in the beginning, the whole what was it? Reinventing tropes or working around them and subverting them, all that kind of thing. Now I've been bloody getting into anime over and over because it's so easy to download and watch, and anime's got so many tired old shitty crappy tropes that are repeated, but some of them that I really love are the ones that take those tropes and deliberately subvert them. Like the guy, the smart genius guy with the glasses who really knows what's going on, who's always pushing them up, the sort like we were talking about. There's a really fantastic anime called Angel Beats, and there's this one guy sort of sitting in the back and he's got the glasses and he pushes them up. And he, comes out with these little words of wisdom, whatever, and everyone just calls him an idiot because all his words of wisdom are moronic, and he lends, no information to anyone else, and he's just a fool. So that it beautifully subverts that particular trope. He's the dumbest one out of all of them. This cartoon Baka and Test, which I really recommend everyone to see, that is just so hilarious. Where these kids all get separated into different classrooms based on their testing level. So the ones who test really badly get shoved into the D class, and the ones who test the best get shoved into the A class, which means they get the best equipment. And they in the A class everything's gold plated and stuff like that, and in the B class they're sitting on broken stools and with nails sticking out, and there's no air conditioning or anything like that, and they have to go to the toilet in a hole in the floor or something. It's really horrible just because they're the dummies. But it has all the tropes, and it plays around with them in, obvious ways. So there's, how in an anime, every time someone falls to someone, they just sprout blood from their nose and start bleeding from their nose. In this one, this character is obsessed with women all the time, and anytime he sees, anything that gets him horny, he just starts bleeding from the nose. But instead of that just being like a stylization or a cartoon thing, people are going, oh my god, where's this blood coming from? Oh, and they're slipping over it and tripping over it, and this guy loses consciousness because of the amount of blood that he's lost from his body, and they have to take him to the doctor's office all the time. Stuff like that. So they subvert them. I think that kind of thing works really well when you know your tropes well enough that you cut the feet out from under them. Because
one of the series that we're doing is like a play on the harem trope that you see a lot in anime, which is, well, it's a reverse harem trope. So the harem trope is where you have a whole heap of guys, sorry, one guy with a whole heap of girls. And then you have the reverse harem, which is where you have the girl with a whole lot of guys. And that's what we're currently playing with at the moment, along with a few other things. But that's like at the core, that's the core trope that we're playing with. And there was actually a game which I played on Christmas Day, actually. And it's free, so go download it. It scared me. I might
Scared
have,
you?
I'm a scaredy cat though. So this is a really interesting this caught my attention because apart from the fact that it was free, it was also a visual novel, which comes with its own set of tropes. So a visual novel usually ends up being a harem as well. And like the guy with a lot of girls he can pick from, and the whole idea is to get the right conversation combinations to be able to get the girl that you want. And some of them can be really insidious. But this one took that format, so took the visual novel format, the harem format, and what got me interested was that the first tag on Steam, which is where I downloaded it, the game client, was psychological horror. And I was like, oh yeah, here we go. So like, I was told like, oh yeah, it's called Doki Doki Literature Club. And I was told that it was super, super scary. And I'm like, yeah, sure it is. And they actually, like, the first thing you see before you even start the game, before you even get to the menu, is something along the lines of, this game is not appropriate for those who are suffering from a heart condition or are, like, essentially, like, easily scared. And I'm like, okay. And then you spend, like, the first half of the game, I'm not going to spoil it because it is one of these games that you just have to play completely blind. But I'll just say, like, it reaches a point where the whole game just descends very quickly into madness. And it completely took my heart and then took it out of my chest and slammed it on the ground and then stomped on it while simultaneously slapping me in the face. And it was like, you did this to yourself. And I was like, I did do this to myself. Now, Alex, take the wheel. I can't deal with this anymore.
Jesus, take the wheel.
Yeah. I can't do this anymore. It was fantastic.
Playthroughs of it in Doki Doki. I won't say anything because it is, part of its draw is that people by now kind of know that there's something strange about it, and that's why they play it. Mm-hmm. But it takes so long for anything suspect to happen in that game.
It makes you complacent.
It really does. Until X happens, you are, and as X is happening, you're playing a romance novel. It's an interactive novel, and it's just like any other, like, oh, I'm gonna read poetry to these girls now. Oh, how am I gonna navigate this awkward teen situation? Oh, like,
yeah. Only there's a particular point when you're through that first half of the game, and you're like, you start to feel like you're going through it, and you're like, oh, something doesn't feel quite right. Things aren't really sitting very well. You start reading this poetry. Yeah, you start, if you get this particular poem from a character and you're like, oh, this is a bit, there's a few red flags there. Yeah. It's like, I know that said psychological horror. Where is this going? And that's how it starts to tug you out of your complacency. You start looking at it and you're like, oh, okay, starting to get a few bad feels right now. And then it kind of reaches a point where you're like, oh God, no, this is starting to get really bad. And then you get to a point where you're like, oh God, what's it going to be? And even though you know it's going to happen, like you expect this particular trope, it still hits you like a ton of bricks. You're still on the ground weeping.
Yeah.
And you're
Wow.
like,
I'm intrigued.
dude,
Yeah.
probably not the best game to play on Christmas Day, but it was definitely very fun.
There's all sorts of theories out about it now too and stuff. That's neither here nor there. It's one of those entities right now that's very interesting to talk about sometimes.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack because they do that awesome thing that web series do. It's not just the game itself, like the visual novel. You can then go into the character files and the actual character file, well, sort of. So this is kind of what twigged in me, where I was like, okay, something's not right. So you can go into the character files, and I was like, the system that was used to build the game Rempe does not have this file type. And I was looking at it and I'm like, this is weird. This is an unknown file type. What is going on here? And so I'm like,
as avid ARGer, you know to go to the files too. Yes. Like as soon as something was going on, you're like, I gotta go to the files, file sources. I gotta go look.
There's something there. I know it. And I'm looking through it and I'm like, oh, it's a code, but I don't know what code it is. And I'm like, no, I'm emotionally exhausted. Close.
I've been beaten into submission.
Someone more clever than me will work this out. I'm just gonna cry for a bit. It actually scared me to the point where I couldn't walk into a room without turning the light on first.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because you thought that somebody was gonna be there, a little somebody, somebody. Yeah.
Could not get that out of my head. It really screwed me. We had to sleep the light on for like 2 or 3 days, and
oh my God, that's awesome.
I make very poor life choices.
You're selling this though. This sounds like this is a must see or must play. Man.
The only disclaimer I will say is that my imagination is very wild. So something which might not scare other people would probably scare me quite a bit.
Okay. You get invested in it and you sort of,
Yes, that's my problem. Yeah. Although my housemate, who is a lot stronger in terms of not getting scared as I do, she played it. And she got to a certain point, and all I heard her say is, "Oh no!" And then she just left the room.
Oh wow! Okay.
Like, nope.
But see, that's the thing. The interesting thing of what it does with tropes, though, is because, as we were saying before, it starts as this light novel, this interactive light novel, and it's got the tropes of a light novel, you know. And as the strange things start to happen, they start off subtle, you know. They don't start off very tropey, like they're, you know, it's in the poem, the poetry, and it's subtle enough where you're like, all right, well, that thing was strange, but maybe it wasn't intentionally strange, or maybe it's just, you know, somebody's acting kind of quirky. Even when you're like, oh, that's not a good thing, you're still kind of like, well, you know, maybe they're just having a tough time, or like, you know, like maybe it's just not that bad. They're
it's
poets.
A bit of bad writing, you know? Or it's a bit off, or they screwed up.
It's kind of like there was one character, you're reading her poems, and you're like, ooh, yeah, you're a bit messed up. Like, I'm not going to give you a pair of scissors near me. It's getting a bit weird. And like you start to get like little hints about the characters, and the entire time you're sitting there and you're like, because you're so used to the tropes and expectations set up by usual harem visual novels being really light, really fluffy, you don't really think about it. And then you get this one, you're starting to be like, Okay, I'm starting to see where the psychological horror tag is coming in. Yeah, that is probably like if you really want to see a subversion, like a genre and trope subversion in action, that is like pretty top tier, I reckon.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Wow, so
You
that's
terrify yourself.
as good as you can get with the trope subversion. Okay.
Have you guys subverted any tropes? Or did you say that and I wasn't paying attention?
Probably.
I don't think so.
Not at this stage. I think we're still building up a lot. Like we're still leaning on the tropes and building them up, because I feel like, much like Doki Doki Literature Club, you almost need to instill the sense of complacency before you can really hit them with the subversion. Because that's when it really hits home. I guess it falls into that. Oh, look, there's a twist, but it's a little bit more than that. If they start to get comfortable, that's when you start looking at the rug and thinking, okay, maybe I can start pulling this and see how far we can go.
Used to be a bastard, hey?
I'm not very nice to my characters, and I'm
terrible to your
kind of
audience
slightly
as well.
nicer to. I love my audience. I love my audience very much, but I don't like them to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Well, I did that.
It's your job to make people.
Yeah.
What was that? Sorry?
So, well, you're telling a story. It's your job to make the audience not necessarily uncomfortable, but to keep them unsuspecting. A lot of people are reading or keeping up with a story in order to
Yeah, you want to give
have
them twists
some
and
level of
turns.
surprise. Because if they know what's going to happen in the story, what's the point of following it anymore? For the most part, I'm speaking generally.
When subversion with Pinky TA, I did that with Ace Kincaid, the character. So he was originally introduced as some kind of heroic, dashing kind of fellow, but I knew he'd turn out to be a villain, and that's a heroic character that turns into a villain is a trope in itself, but it's not usually the 30s kind of heroic kind of character that does it, and that's what I did with him. And that wasn't a huge subversion, but it was a bit of one, because you don't usually have Indiana Jones being the bad guy sort of thing, and that's or what was the character in Red Dwarf? Remember how Rimmer became Ace Rimmer? Remember that one?
Oh my god, that was like fantastic. Yeah. Oh, I love that show so much. I actually have a bit of a girl crush on Chris Barry, who plays Rimmer. And when he turned up as like Ace Rimmer, I'm like, oh, please don't. This is not making it any easier.
It's just far too much. It's just overload.
Yeah.
But so yeah, he was that kind of character, and he turned out bad. And yeah, I like doing that kind of thing. It's fun.
Yeah.
Well, concerning that kind of thing, Putrid Meat. So Bones he's an anti-hero. If he falls in any kind of trope, he's definitely the anti-hero. But it's interesting because in that way, anti-heroes started off as trope subversions, in a sense, if you think about it. Because you had, especially the kind of anti-hero that Bones is based off of, like Lobo and stuff, it's like this line of subversion. So, like, you have the superheroes, and then you had, the birth of guys like Wolverine, the kind of somber anti-heroes. Well, he became somber and all sorts of shit. But the anti-heroes that were explicitly exactly, the name anti-hero. And then Lobo comes along, who's like the subversion of the anti-hero trope, and that he's anti-hero for the anti-hero. Like, he knocks it up a notch, and he's just kind of not silly, but he's funny. It's spoofing the whole anti-hero thing, which is what Deadpool does as well. And so Bones is more in that kind of line, I think. So he's like the trope of a trope of a trope.
It's the mutant baby.
Yeah, he is. He is.
He's like the inception of tropes.
Yeah, yeah. And in that way, being a post-apocalyptic place, I've got some tropes in there too, with the mutants and whatnot, and the whole 80s thing with the corporate overlord and stuff like that. So there's like, I tend to use like some outdated tropes, I think, that have been like, once a trope has been properly forgotten, I think it's okay to kind of bring it back again.
To
maybe.
revive it, yeah. No one knows where it came from. Well, people do.
It's
but
dead,
a
it's
lot of people
harmless.
don't.
You know? Yeah.
It's like, I promise, guys, this is totes original.
Totes original. You're not over like 20, are you? You've never seen this before. It's totally new.
Those are cool. Even to people who recognize them, they're cool because they hark back to a time that you remember. But yeah, they're sort of, classic kind of things. Think about, what was the movie? Kung Fury, which is all based it's all made out of 80s tropes. And it's fantastic because of it. Even though they're twisted into a 90s kind of, well, not 90s, but the 2010s sort of way. But, it's still cool because of it.
Yeah, but that thing could go wrong really easily too, though. Because I've thought of a lot of things that are kind of throwbacks to the 80s and 90s that are made to be really tropey and like referential in that kind of way, that don't quite work because they lean on the tropes too much. Like,
okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I'm trying to think of some references, and for the most part, I can only really think of some newer thrash bands that do that, which doesn't relate to anybody on here. But it definitely happens in like some movies and TV shows and stuff. So.
Oh, I just bring it back to comics. There was a comic that did it. It was called something Ninja. I just can't remember the name. Oh my god, you can't do a search on it to find it because there's like 6 million comics with ninja in the title. But there was this comic with aliens and ninjas and all that kind of stuff, and it was built on 80s tropes. And it's good because of it. So that one worked. And it's, did the whole Kung Fury thing before Kung Fury came along. So yeah, you can go too far and just be a pale imitation, but you can make it work and do it really well. So yeah, everything's a balancing act, but it's worth trying.
That reminds me of again, a musical reference, but I don't know if you guys have ever heard of vaporwave.
Ooh, yeah, that's creepy.
Yeah, that in itself is pretty tropey. And it's kind of hit and miss music-wise, because there are some people, like with any music, they could get super lazy with it. But what it basically is it takes like cuts of like old like 80s and 90s songs and stuff and makes these kind of weird remix makes it sound like I can't really describe it. Like,
it's more of a reimagining.
Distorted. Yeah, reimagining, and they sound just really strange and bizarre a lot of times. Like I said, sometimes they just kind of miss, but like they're using some of the well-known songs. Now it's kind of maybe taking the tropes thing a little too far in my definition, but they're taking something that was very popular at one time, songs that anybody would have recognized. And they're taking them and reimagining them with these very 80s kind of effects and these very dated kind of sounds and stuff like that.
Okay.
But it renders the music with a surreal quality as well. And that's kind of what I feel like Vaporwave is definitely trying to evoke this feeling of almost being in like a weird dream state. But, when you start to... something's familiar, but it's not quite familiar.
Yeah. Twist it people's expectations, which is what you do with tropes. So does it have that like extra reverb that 1980s stuff did, and those special drums, the electronic drums, boom, 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 boom? Those ones that have all the echo. Yeah, that one.
Yeah. I can feel it coming.
Not that one.
You just have to kind of listen to it. It's just got, it's more kind of sound effecty, and like it's got some like a lot of that. What's it called? I think it's called Paul stretch or something. I'm probably using it wrong. I don't know enough music technical stuff, but like it's just like, I don't know. You just gotta listen to it. They play with the tones a lot and stuff, and it's more in like the mixing kind of, and then like they'll make certain parts repeat kind of strangely. It's like, it's that Twin Peaks vibe kind of.
Yes.
And that it's like nostalgic, but it's also like
bordering on a
scary
nightmare.
part of nostalgia. Yeah, like walking into a house that you knew as a kid, but it's haunted. Like that kind of thing.
Everything's been moved like to the left by an inch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you go in there and you go, this is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife.
This is not my beautiful wife.
Like, it looks kind of similar, but I don't know, the features aren't in the right place. It's really interesting though. It's definitely incredibly unique in terms of like a music style. It's very recognizable. But in of itself, it's also very unique. And it evokes some very, at once comforting and unsettling. Yeah, it is Twin Peaks. Both comforting and unsettling at the same time.
Well, this has turned into a weird take on the whole trope idea, but I do like that. I was thinking of this, there was this piece of music they use. If you've ever seen Portlandia, I'm sure you have. You've all seen Portlandia.
Yeah.
It has this bit of music at the start. That sort of it's just this weird kind of sounding thing, and it sounds sort of good, but it's only played for a few seconds. It's not at the very start, but it is. They sort of show this bridge opening up in Portland, and they play this music, and it sounds sort of weird, sort of like something from the 80s, but not quite, and it's like really hard to recognize. And so I went and found the actual piece of music that they use, and it's from this guy who did it, and the whole thing sort of goes on like that, and it really has that kind of, oh my god, this does come from, I can't work it out. And I eventually found out that he did remix something from the 80s and do his own take on it. But the weird thing is that the piece of music that's actually from the 80s sounds like a piece of crap, and it does not sound 80s at all. It sounds just like Barry Manilow or something, it's awful.
Huh.
But the version this guy did, it sounds more 80s than his version, which is weird. It sounds, more 2000s, but so that totally twisted all expectations. He created a new piece of art that way. So this this is a very weird take on tropes.
I mean, with such a huge subject, you could kind of go in a million different directions when you just talk about tropes, right?
You can.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's not just subverting them. Like there's kind of more.
Yeah, using
sort of an all-encompassing thing. Yeah.
You can subvert them by using another trope. Like you can subvert them by playing them straight, but also use another trope that you are also playing straight, but they are clashing between them. So
right.
You still, like, you're not actually subverting a trope, but you are canceling it out with another one, and still people will not detect it. That's what I am doing often in Without Moonlight. Like, I don't actively seek to subvert tropes, but I like dropping different tropes that I know are going to sabotage one with the other. Don't laugh, okay?
I think it's an actual brilliant idea.
Now it snuck up on me. Anyway.
I've seen that done. It works well when people do it. Yeah, it's a good little technique because you don't know which trope's going to win. Think now this one usually ends this way and that one ends this way, but they can't both. So which is going to beat the other one?
Do you have people like shipping the tropes?
Yeah. Like I had after spoiler, I suppose, but it's far enough back. It shouldn't like it's a spoiler anyway. After Anna gets shot in Without Moonlight, people started thinking that okay, maybe this is the anyone can die thing. So we have to now expect that they might start dropping off like flies, or even if they don't, that who is going to be the next one to get the axe?
Like no one has plot armor.
Nobody, yeah. So that's not entirely true. Even in the trope, the actual full-blown trope of anyone can die, that's not actually true until at least the very last scene. Someone has to have the plot armor so that the plot can exist. But
yeah, we've all seen the recent season of Game of Thrones.
Well, yeah, but the thing is that what they are doing, and I have to say, okay, you're gonna make me go off on a Game of Thrones tangent.
Oh, please do, go. I'm all. Let me assume that. Hang on, let me get my gossip position in. All right, go.
So yeah, what they are doing is anyone can die, and they sort of pass on the plot armor to the next person that's going to be carrying the plot torch. So you can
next
see,
of kin.
Yeah, basically. So they that they until they pass on the plot torch, they can't die, and that. So that's it's like how do you call in English this race where they have this thing that they pass from one runner to the other?
Nepotism.
Nepotism.
Only if they are all related. I was talking about a relay. Like a relay.
Oh, relay, yeah.
That's it.
It's like a relay game. So I
Nepotism.
Nepotism.
That's a really long relay.
It makes me wish like nepotism in Game of Thrones was how nepotism in real life works nowadays, at least. So, we would at least see more interesting things in summits and stuff. But anyway, what I was saying is that in Without Moonlight, what I was doing was that I had tropes that go with the main character scattered to 3 different characters. So know who is the main character that gets the plot armor.
So you don't know which one actually inherited it. So they're constantly like, ooh.
Yeah. And to make it, I tried to make it double blind. Like I had literally written out 3 different plot progressions depending on who died, so that I would leave it to how it felt as I came to the scene. So when the actual one of the 3 main characters does get shot and he does actually die, people were not believing it. Like they actually thought I was going to, he's very, very hurt, but he's alive.
You know what? We've just done that.
Really? Oh wow! I really should go and check it out.
Go read it.
Well, you know what? I don't want to be left out, so I need to kill one of my main characters now. So I need to get in the.
I actually I was part of this roleplay group for a while, and after I did this, I was not allowed to kill any more characters because it was just. I think I broke a few too many hearts. So we had oh my gosh, it was like, if you had tropes, you should have read this roleplay. It was terrible. It was like bad miscommunication, drama for the sake of drama. Like literally that was the motto of the entire roleplay, drama for the sake of drama. And it was really fun. But we had this thing where the parents of the kids that we were role-playing turned up for a day, and like, all hell broke loose. And I introduced this one one parent, and everyone really liked her. She was like complete opposite to her daughter, and she was really bubbly and really friendly, and everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, I love this character's mom." And then I killed her in a horrific car crash, and and everyone was just like, "Say what now?"
And they were going, "How could you?"
Yeah, they're like, "You're not allowed to do that again, Georgia Armand." And I'm like, "Oh." So yeah, it was. I am not allowed to kill characters. I have to get it stamped. I have to go through all the necessary approvals.
Yeah. You're not allowed
in my case, like after they actually saw the body, I had to show the body for them to be
They had to identify the body in the morgue to believe it. It's like, excuse me, audience, can you come down to the station?
We know you're just gonna.
Like, why must I actually saw the funeral?
You're gonna do a Days of Our Lives thing, and they'll say, "Actually, that was my twin brother, Victor Kyriakis." The real Basil.
I have a secret identical cousin.
And actually, I really didn't want him to be the one that got the axe. I wanted it to be his significant other, but no, it was him.
Do you know what? Characters just sometimes do what they want, and sometimes that just gets them killed. And you're just like, dude, I tried everything I could, but
yeah, exactly. It's like,
you know what?
Yeah.
That's a good subversion of it, though, because it's always the guy's love interest that dies, and that spurs him on to further heights. You know, I have this revenge to, you know, oh, my lost love. Oh, I'm so sad. And you completely flip that. So that's a really, really good thing to do, because that becomes so boring.
I didn't flip that. She was supposed to notice the trap, not he. But he noticed the trap first, because she was all, you know, happy. Now she has decided never to be happy.
She's like, anyway, that was my dose of cynicism that I desperately needed.
But anyway, so
thank you for doing that, Tom.
And I hated it. It really cost me. Now, not so much anymore, but when it happened, it really cost me. And people then, after like a couple of weeks, emailed me saying, "Oh, I could tell that he would die because he was the mentor, and mentors always, get killed off halfway." Into the story and everything.
And you were like, dude, I wrote this out 3 different ways. I had no idea where it was going.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So they're trying to fit it into what they know about the tropes, and they're trying to go,
the whole hindsight's 20/20 thing.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. You know, like we were just talking about the serial killers, where we're like, oh yeah, I knew he was bad. Yeah, 100%. Saw them all away.
Yeah. I got a gift, I can tell. I look at people and I immediately know where to hide the book.
Yeah. It's like, I know how many bodies are in your closet. I'm watching you.
Well, we should really wrap it up, because we're sort of an hour and a half now. So
shit.
Hammered it.
It is all that talk about vaporwave. It wasn't it? Exactly. The vaporwave that put us over.
That's the fat. We need to cut it out.
Too much aesthetic.
Damn crappy music tastes.
Nobody understands.
Right.
Nah, vaporwave's cool. Vaporwave is real cool.
Exactly. Your coolness points have been risen amongst the 10 listeners. Okay.
5 of which are probably us.
Well, thank you guys for being on Quackcast number 379. The Troptastic.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Lovely. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Oz.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh.